And now it's time for Good Deals Gone Bad. Deal number 1 features Clint, the Playmaker DeMello.
Month's been going okay. Well, not for sales side.
Clint is going head-to-head with Danny the Snake, a salesman from a sister dealership to Manteca Dodge, Friendly Chevrolet.
Clint is just, he's having a slow day, probably a slow month.
And then there's the customer, Ricky Harvey.
We're just waiting to see what our prices are going on, our interest rate and everything on the car. Looking to buy a new Dodge.
So here's the story. Ricky, the customer, wants to buy a new car. Clint DeMello has not only sold Ricky cars in the past, they're friends. Danny is a salesperson at Friendly Chevrolet, a dealership owned by the same family who owns Manteca Dodge, which is where Clint DeMello works. But instead of going to see his friend Clint DeMello when he was ready to buy a car, Ricky instead went to see Danny at Friendly Chevrolet. Ricky finally decided he wanted a new 2006 Dodge Charger, which is sold at Manteca Dodge, where Clint works. But Danny is Clint's friend, and he knows that Ricky is Clint's customer. But Danny wants to make a sale to Ricky, so instead of calling Clint, he takes Ricky to Manteca Dodge himself. And how does Clint feel about what Danny did?
He's called the Snake because he came here from another dealership and sold her.
Why are you gonna put that? Clint, don't.
You don't even work here, dude. You work at Friendly.
He's a snake.
Basically, it's just doing your job as a salesperson.
A snake is basically he came from another dealership, which is allowed because it's in the family.
And doing your job is staying in follow-up, in contact with your customers you previously sold.
I know the person he sold is a friend of mine.
It just so happened I have the ability to sell at all 4 dealerships they own.
So he could have actually told us, you know, hey, I got a customer for you.
He's having a slow day, probably a slow month.
But he didn't.
He's just trying to bust my chop.
He's a snake.
But I'll get him. I live next door to him, so.
He's a snake.
Come on.
What's this?
This actually shows what he is.
I'm in the middle of doing a deal. Can you please leave?
Oh, yes, let me do it.
Appreciate that. I know that you're friends, but you gotta get out of here. Rick, let me show you where we're at, big dog. You told me if I couldn't get you your payment, I couldn't earn your business, right? I mean, this is lower payment and only changes by a point, but your excellent credit helped us get there.
I'll go with this.
All right?
I like that.